Hi all, welcome back. Now that you have learned about different types of operators in Python, like the arithmetic operator, comparison operator, logical operator, now let's understand a very important concept, the order of precedence. So what is an order of precedence and why does it matter? So whenever you write an expression in Python with multiple operators, right, so the order matters. For example, I'm going to write 3 plus 2 into 5, like our high school math, right? So taking the concept from the high school maths, we have an order of precedence, so which is given the highest order of precedence. Whenever there is a parenthesis, the grouping is given the highest the precedence here, highest importance. The first order of operation happens in this specific order, right? So now you can see in this the multiplication is the fourth precedence here. After that comes the addition here. Therefore, it's not 3 plus 2 into 5, rather it is 2 into 5 plus 3, right? 2 into 5, 10, plus 3 is 13. It's not 3 plus 2, 5 5s are 25. It's not 25, rather it is 13, right? So most of this time we get confused, right? So we take it light about the order of precedence when we are working with various different models and when we likely to give some mathematical operations. So that's where this basics, the Python operator precedence is very, very important, right? So just like the math that the high school math what we have learned, so the Python follows a set of rules to decide which operation to perform first. Therefore, these rules are called as the order precedence, right? So imagine you are cooking a recipe. You boil the water first, right? So then you add the pasta, then you add the salt and spices. You cannot reverse the order or you cannot mix the order. You have to go in a specific order. You have to follow an order, and if you don't, you mess up the recipe. Similarly, Python follows its own order to evaluate the expressions. Always the precedence, right? So it's not left to right, right? So the precedence is not left to right. Right, now we have seen, right? So the precedence has its own order, right? So it's not the left to right precedence, rather it has its own order. If for example, I'm going to put print 2 plus 3 into 4, right? So within this bracket, it's going to take first, right? So and again 4 3s are 12, 12 plus 2 14, right? So the Python multiplies first and adds, because multiplication has the precedence 4 here, rather the addition has the precedence 5, right? So that's why the precedence matter a lot, right? So and when operators have an equal precedence, right, so then associativity comes into place. So what is an associativity? Right, some operators are evaluated to left to right and some right to left, like exponential, right? Whenever I have a star, right? So whenever I have an exponential operators, right? So that's where the associativity comes into play, right? So they are evaluated left to right and some are right to left. Now let's take an example. What is right to left, right? So it's always left to right we spoke about. What is that left to right associativity, right? So say for example 2 star 3, right? So 2 star 3. So what should it be? 2 to the power 3, right? So 2 to the power 3, right? So again star 2. So what should happen here? This will be evaluated in such a way: 2 star 3 star 2, right? Therefore 3 square is 9, 3 3s are 9, 2 to the power 9 is 512, right? So that's where I say right to left associativity whenever I have an exponential operator, star operator, right? So the left to right associativity happens for all the other plus, minus, and what your multiplication, division, your mod, right? So all this has this left to right associativity, right? So only the exponential has right to left associativity, right? So that's where that's a small change in the order of precedence, right? So we always use an parenthesis in such a scenario where it's confusing, right? So if you are unsure how the expressions will be evaluated, it's always a good practice to use a parenthesis, right? So what we'll be thinking, 2 to the power 3 and then the resultant to the square, right? So in Python that's not true, right? So it's going to take 3 square and then whatever the resultant value 2 to the power 9, right? So we should be very careful whenever there is an exponential sign, right? So this has the right to left, let me put it up here, right to left associativity, right? So this has this right to left associativity, right? So that's about this associativity. And then now let's go next. Now let's understand what is an typecasting. So what is an typecasting? What is an user input? What is an typecasting? What is an user input? And what is strings? What are strings? And let's also speak about this print formatting, right? So now let's start with this typecasting. Now first, or rather let's start with an user input here. I'll add an user input first. So I'm doing it for a reason. First, let's take an input from the user. How will you take an input from the user? Using this by default input method or the input function within Python. How will you take an user's input to process it dynamically? Input is a keyword, right? So you can see that it has become green in color. Whenever you see something is in green in color, these are reserved keywords, right? So when I've given something, right? So whenever I've declared a variable here, this is not green in color. So whenever I've given if, else, and, right? So all this has become green in color. This means these are reserved keywords, right? I cannot use a reserved keywords to store it to store any value within it. I cannot consider it as a normal variable. Rather, these are default Python functions. That's what it is called as a reserved keyword. Now, I'm going to take in user input. Enter your name, right? So I'm going to say name is equal to this. Now, let's print the name. For this, it's going to take in user input. I'm going to say learn with Sarvesh, right? So you can see it's printing the name right away. So it has taken the name dynamically using this function input, right? So very important thing to know here is what is the type of the name variable, right? So the name has a string. Whatever the value, it's going to take it in the input. The input always returns as a string output, right? So say for example, I'm going to say, what is your name? I'm given 1, 2, 3, right? So for example, I've given 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 is actually an integer. If I check the type of name, still it will be in string, right? So what is the takeaway here? Anything that you take from a user as an input, right? That will be considered as a string, right? So the input will always return and string even if you're going to enter a number, right? Now how will you convert this? Say for example, I'm going to take int of input of enter your age, right? Now let's make it age, right? Now I'm going to say my age is 40, right? Now you check the type of the age. Now you can see it as input integer. It's an int, right? So int of input of enter your age. So the input is going to return only string as an output. The moment I've given an integer of it, is converted a string to an integer, right? So first thing is called as user input. The second, the moment I have said int of this is called as a typecasting, right? So let's give the name, the old name here for your reference. Let's give print name, right? So this is user input, this is typecasting. This is called as a typecasting, right? So enter your age, I'm giving it as 40, right? So now type of age is integer. Whenever I give type of a variable a name, it's going to return me what is the type of that variable. That's what we have learned here. Now let's take another example. Now let's see how to convert an integer to string. Convert an integer to string, right? So say for example, I've given age as 25, right? So the message is equal to I am, right? So I'm going to give plus string of age, again plus years old. Now I want to put this in the print statement. Print message. I am 25 years old. You can see how I have converted an integer to a string using this str function, right? So I've used this str function, str of this age, and I've printed an message here. So I've combined numbers and text strings using this plus, right? So the number must be cast to a string here. Now let's also take another example, how to convert a string to a boolean. Let's take this user input. Before that, let me put an heading, convert string to boolean. Let me take an user input, right? So or let's take input. Let's first take input of type yes to subscribe, type yes to subscribe and given space. Now I'm going to give yes subscribed is equal to boolean of user input dot lower double equal to yes. Now let's print subscription active comma yes subscribed, right? So type yes to subscribe, right? So I'm going to give yes. You can see the subscription active is true. So you can see how I've converted a string to a boolean, right? So I've converted the user's intent, right? Type yes to subscribe. I've given yes. Therefore, whenever the condition I've used in conditional statement here is equal to yes, it has taken the boolean, right? So if it is true, then it will print true, right? So if I'm going to give no, it false subscription, or I'm giving an hyphen, or if I'm giving an NA, so everything will return in false because I've used in bool keyword, right? So I've used in bool keyword. So subscription active is false here, right? So and we can keep on going here. Now let's also take about another example where I'm going to take two user inputs, right? So I'm going to take multiple, I'll say multiple inputs in one line. How to take in multiple inputs in one single line, right? So you are going to see here input, right? So enter two numbers separated by space, right? So and I'm going to give dot split as this function, right? So x comma y is equal to, so there are two inputs and I'm going to take it and store it into two variables x comma y, right? So I've given a clear input, enter two numbers separated by space, right? 34 space 45, right? So if I give enter, so automatically 34 will be stored in x, 45 will be stored in y. Now let's print x comma y, 34 and 45. There are two values that stored in two variables here, right? And I can also have another logic and say for example, I'm going to make password making, I'm going to make the password masking optional with get pass. What is some password masking optional within get pass? Now I'm going to import in library get pass. So what does it do? I'm going to give get pass dot get pass, enter your password, I'm going to store that into a variable password is equal to this, right? Now I'm going to print password received, enter and password, right? So I am not going to print right? So password 123, right? So enter your password is received, that's all, the password is received, right? Therefore the beauty here, instead of giving it as an input, the moment I type it as an input, the input will be displayed, right? So the Python here provides a special module called as a getPass, right? So the special module keeps, that helps keep your sensitive information hidden, right? So what is the benefit here? It's going to hide what you're going to type, right? So no characters, not even asterisks, right? So nothing is shown in the screen, right? So I can completely hide it, right? So this prevents all this shoulder surfing and accidental exposure, whatever it is, right? So which are commonly in command line tools, scripts and login systems, right? So that's what you can see here, right? So I can enter a password and I can also make it, let's also elaborate this. Say for example, I want to add a username here. So username is equal to input enter username, right? So here you can see the get pass enter password and you can see the login attempt received for user, right? So and I can give the username, right? So enter the username Sarvesh, okay, enter the password 1234, right? So login attempt received for users and something, right? So I've given 1234, by default it has given something. So that's the benefit of using this get pass, right? So yes, now we started with the order of precedence and the typecasting, and we have also seen about the user inputs, the strings, and few print formatting technique, right? So again, we'll continue the forthcoming session.